Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this discussion on women's empowerment for food security and nutrition for all, evidence from joint UN work. Thank you for so many of you for turning up here over lunchtime. It's great to see this room so full, and I'm sure more people are coming in as we move forward. I'm Joanne Leviton from IFAD, and I'm going to be moderating the discussion today. I'd also like to welcome our panelists who will introduce formally later. They're sitting here, and we've also got participants from Niger on the video screen. So we'll move on to that in a little while. Just a little housekeeping message. The messengers will be passing around a tablet. It's kind of like an attendance sheet. So if you don't mind filling in your email address, your name and email address on that, just so we have a record of who came to the event today. So today we're looking at the joint program on accelerating progress towards the economic empowerment of rural women, called JPRWEE. It's been implemented by FAO, IFAD, WFP, and UN Women, and it's in 7 different countries. And this session is particularly on how to measure women's empowerment and some of the innovative ways to evaluate impact and draw concrete results. So to open the discussion, we'll begin with a video message from one of the program's major contributors, the Director General of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, Karen Jampton. If we could play the video, please.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of SIDA, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, I thank you for the opportunity to welcome you at this important event. Through the 2017 Forum on Women's Empowerment in the Context of Food Security and Nutrition, the Committee on World Food Security, it was reiterated that gender equality and women's economic empowerment are key prerequisites for ensuring the right to adequate food, achieving food security, as well as improved nutrition for all. It is also a prerequisite for realizing the 2030 Agenda. This is even more important today, when evidence continues to signal a rise in world hunger, returning to levels from almost a decade ago. However, despite this recognition, rigorous evidence on whether and how specific investments empower women is still limited. There is a need to systematically examine strategies that agricultural projects use to empower women, as well as measuring empowerment. This is fully in line with the new Swedish strategy for global gender equality and women's and girls' rights, which was launched in May this year. Through this strategy, the government of Sweden renews its engagement towards the achievement of equality between women, men, girls and boys. It stresses the importance of increased access to, as well as use of, sex disaggregated data and gender equality research. In line with this, it is crucial to recognize what women and men do, respectively, in the informal sector, where a lot of agricultural production takes place also today. I hope that today's event will be fruitful and full of information sharing and learning. I also hope that it will bring new evidence on the effectiveness of a layered, integrated approach to women's economic empowerment. The joint program on accelerating rural women's economic empowerment precedes and can serve as a showcase for the current UN reform. As the major donor to this partnership, we at SIDA believe that this is a cost-efficient, integrated and streamlined working method. The joint program should inspire other UN agencies as a tool for achieving better results by collaboration. I also hope that other donors will decide to join the JPRWEE. I wish you good luck with the discussions today and look forward to hearing about the very encouraging results achieved so far. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for that introduction. I mean, I think we're going to be discussing today. And I mean, I think everyone in the room recognizes how important women's empowerment is. I mean, we all work on this. But let's talk about results now, because results are very hard to measure. We've got a keynote presentation from Gerald Gunter, who's the UN Women Representative in Kyrgyzstan. He's going to present the results from the first ever evaluation of the joint program and talk a bit about the impact that it's having on the ground. So please come up, Gunter.
Yeah. Thank you very much for turning out in large numbers here today. My thanks also go to FAO for hosting us, to WFP for bringing me here, and of course to the governments of Sweden and Norway for having been generous over the years to support this program, which is now entering a second phase, and we do hope that it will have some time to go in Kyrgyzstan. Let me start telling you a little bit about Kyrgyzstan. Probably not many of you are very familiar with this country. It's a small country of about 6 million people in Central Asia. It is the most open and democratic country in that region, which allows us to really work the way we feel in collaboration with government and civil society we should, in order to support rural women. In a country that still has a poverty rate of about 25%, which has shrunk over the years, but a persistent extreme poverty that is very hard to address. Agriculture and migration remittances are really the mainstay of the Kyrgyzstani economy. There's close to 1 million people of the 6 million population in total that is in fact in migration, mainly to Russia and to Kazakhstan, and 40% of these are women. There are agricultural resources in the country. Land and irrigated land is, however, limited, and with the population growth that the country is seeing, it increasingly becomes difficult for people to make a living on the land. So what we really need is to engage everyone, including, of course, the 50% of the population that are women in this effort, and to use these resources very effectively and efficiently. And this is where our project comes along. Women's labor force participation rate is rather low. Only 1 in 2 women is gainfully employed. This is much less than it was in the Soviet Union, from which Kyrgyzstan became independent in 1991. However, many women are involved in the informal sector, which is not really regulated, and of course doesn't produce any tax revenue for the government to provide the services a state should indeed provide. Therefore, investment in education is very important, and we do hope that some of the results of our project, leading to higher household incomes of the rural poor, in fact, are invested in educating the next generation, so that there is a starting point to them actually building the skills that will allow them to participate in the global economy. The 4 agencies that are coming together under this project in Kyrgyzstan, 3 of them resident, and IFAD, of course, based in Rome, have for years now tried to work together. It's a flagship in the local UNCT, where we have excellent relations amongst the about 18 resident UN agencies in terms of the people, but very little real collaboration in joint programs. Some donors expect us to have joint programs, and we do have them, but I think this program here is interesting in that it really brings together the agencies in a joint effort of work planning and implementation. We are tending to the same beneficiaries. We are tending to them in the same villages. So obviously our joint package can really go much further than having several UN agencies work in a district on something or another and then calling it a joint program. So in the spirit of UN repositioning, I think this is an excellent project. Beyond the direct interventions aimed at getting women involved in economic activities and adding to household incomes, improving nutrition. We are also in this project able, and that is a flexibility that is much appreciated and sometimes may go beyond what was foreseen in the global project document. We're able to work with women to be elected to local councils by having platforms that are attractive to the voters. We're working with young journalists, female journalists, to engage in the social media that is making its way even to the remote areas of the country where this project works. And we've added a whole range of other activities to engage the public, the community in these villages to, to be more progressive in many ways. Let me also mention that in Kyrgyzstan we face problems of early marriage, which usually affects the Uzbek community, which is about 15% of the population, but more so so-called bride kidnapping, where girls are abducted for marriage, often by people they have never met before. Sadly, this presence continues and happens about 13,000 times every year. That affects mainly the Kyrgyz population, ethnicity. Our project also helps here with the messages it gets around the community, and with making women economic actors and making women participate in decision making, especially through this GALS methodology, which IFAD pioneered and is piloting and upscaling now in our program. So the ultimate aim of our project is not just to add to household incomes, to add to nutrition and to deal with pockets of hunger, but to really engage women in all aspects of private and public life as equal, and to grow the economy. The IMF has stated that the only way to really add to growth rates of the economy is to get women active in the labor force, and we all know that when women command money, they invest it in their children, and that's why I think it is very important that we have many young women in this project. This is a challenge. In the phase that recently concluded, we have focused more on the older women, who are sometimes part of the problem when it comes to that bride kidnapping, in that they put up their sons to actually steal a girl to also help them with their household chores. But young women are disempowered. Young women have children, and having income they can decide what to do with. Investing that with these children really makes a difference. A challenge for us has been to move away from organizing women in self-help groups. Several thousand of them, of the project beneficiaries, have got together in informal self-help groups. The future, however, is to graduate these participants of the project into formal institutions. Kyrgyzstan has an excellent framework, a legal framework of cooperatives and microcredit agencies. Under our project, we have set up 4 institutions that are still weak, and the current phase that we've started now will really focus also on making their management perform better, so that they do deliver more services to the beneficiaries and ultimately also grow stronger economically. We also engage many of these women in micro-processing units of vegetable, fruits and milk that add value to the original produce and can be transported and sold in markets beyond these villages. In Kyrgyzstan, we have a very interesting setup of local self-government, which probably doesn't have its equal between the Atlantic and the Pacific. It is really bringing the communities into making decisions, and of course by helping women get elected to local councils where they make decisions on how to use resources, we hope that resources are allocated to kindergartens, which would free women up to actually pursue economic endeavors, and not just on what men usually want, which is concrete and asphalt in the ground. Basically, I'm supposed to also tell you about the evaluation. We had an evaluation a few months back. The evaluation findings, there were 4 relating each one to relevance, effectiveness, sustainability and efficiency, and that then there were 4 recommendations. Most of them we are attending now in the current phase. However, we will not be able to meaningfully address all of them because sadly the funds available, and in Kyrgyzstan this is $800,000 for a period of about 1 year of project implementation to be split between 4 UN agencies, of course, cannot really deal with that. With these funds we will attend, UN Women specifically will attend to completing the work with the second cohort. We have 2 cohorts in the first phase of the project. The first one had a lot of assistance over a long time. The second cohort had less time and fewer interventions. We will continue and complete the work with them, especially on girls, which really changes the household relations between the genders in that men are starting to take part of the burden of household work from their wives after a very intensive analysis of the situation, including certain tools where people start dreaming, which few people do in Kyrgyzstan because they simply don't have the time and funds to do this, about their future, and part of this is change gender relations. Sadly, however, releasing women from spending time on household chores and freeing them up for employment does not, of course, address the issue of women not having time for themselves. And this is something which, through GALS, we're trying to attend to make sure that women really have more time to pursue their own interests and maybe learning and vocational training to complement their engagement in economic activities. So let me also mention what the other agencies are doing. FAO is continuing in this phase, building the agricultural skills really that are necessary and providing for quality seeds and access to these, which hopefully will be guaranteed in the future through these institutions that I mentioned. WFP provides food assistance, innovations, and also helps really on the economic side with building capacity on value chains so that people can obtain the maximum value from the products that they grow. And IFAD, as I mentioned, will continue very much with GALS for a new cohort, a third cohort of about 700 people that we will try to get into this project in the next year, starting now. Then let me finish with some thoughts about scaling up this project and its interventions. I mentioned already the growth and transiting from self-help groups, informal institutions to formal institutions is really key. The government of the Kyrgyz Republic leaves us as donors, as development partners, a lot of space, but on the downside of that, it does not really deliver the social and other services it should as a state. Therefore, having created that enabling environment of credit and cooperative organizations, we will need to tap into that to make sure that our beneficiaries and others can really draw benefit from that. We will target more carefully, I think, as I mentioned, more on the younger women, also more on ethnic minorities that have not really been well represented in the first phase, which is also a function of the institutions, the local institutions, the local partners, NGOs we have engaged being mainly staffed or only staffed by members of the main ethnic group, the ethnic Kyrgyz, and that we will change to some extent. We have to, in all we do, try to avoid creating additional expectancy in villages where we've worked already, or even dependencies, which is always a problem. That's why making things more sustainable in institutions will help us. And yes, we need to indeed engage a larger number of national local service providers, our partners in NGOs, so that in fact innovations like GALS can be widely made available to other donors in their projects, or even communities, municipalities, and local governments to pursue. But at the end of the day, I think this program is excellent in that it brings us together. There are efficiency gains yet to be made, and I hope we will start down this road in this year, which has started now. But overall, this project should serve as an example what different UN agencies can do that have mandates that connect, sometimes overlap, but sometimes also contradict each other when it comes to working on the ground. But I think the challenge has been met very well in Kyrgyzstan, in that these 4 agencies have worked together in a good spirit, and heads of agencies have tried to also bring their national staff along, because of course for all of us it is always easier to tell governments that they need to change, than to actually change ourselves. So with this in mind, thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Gerald. And you will have a chance to ask Gerald questions later. If you have questions for him, he'll join us for the question and answer session at the end. We're going to be discussing more with our panelists about some specific approaches to evaluation of the project. But before we do that, let's just go to Nepal and hear from some of the beneficiaries themselves. Can you play the video? Thanks.
छोरा मान्छेहरूभन्दा महिलाहरूको चाहिँ कृषिमा बढी योगदान रहँदै आएको र कृषि कर्ममा बढी सामिप्यता महिलाहरूकै हुने हुनाले यो संस्थाहरूको सहकार्यमा रुई प्रोजेक्टबाट हामीले चाहिँ सहकार्य गरिरहेका छौँ। यो रुई प्रोजेक्टबाट खास गरी एडीएसले इङ्गित गरे अनुरूप चाहिँ महिलाहरूको जुन अब सशक्तिकरणको निम्ति जेसी स्ट्र्याटेजी एउटा चाहिँ नेपाल सरकारसँग सहकार्य गरेर हामी यो काम गरिरहेका छौँ।
रुई कार्यक्रम से हमी के बहुत फायदा भेला। हमी के पोखरी खोनाला, बोरिंग देल। हमी के महिला सब के समाज में हेपैत रहे पुरुष सब जे महिला सब किछो न कर सकया। हमी के समूह ने रह के बोरिंग के सुविधा भेल त हमी के महिला जैसन पुरुष जैसन काम क के देखैली महिला सब। हामीलाई दुःख थियो हैन, दुःख थियो अब केटाकेटी पनि अब पढाउनु पर्छ, तिनवटा बच्चा पढाउनु पर्यो। तरकारी खेती लगाएको अहिले लगाइसके धेरै आनन्द छ नि, अब 2 पैसा खेलाउन पाएको छ। जित्दै मास्दै नगर्ने अहिले अब म बरु खर्खाँचो दुःखसो गरे उ गरी अनि त्यहाँबाट 21,930 रुपैयाँ भएछ जम्मा। यही पैसा मलाई भइहाल्यो भनि लगेर मैले कम्प्युटर 3 महिना सिकाएँ। छोरीलाई 3 महिना सिकाएपछि त्यही खर्च गरी अनि त्यहाँबाट रहेको पैसाले मैले 2टा बोका किनेँ।
पहिले कस्तो थियो महिलाहरूले आफ्नो परिचय भन्दा पनि लजाउँथ्यो, घुम्टो छोपेर बस्थ्यो। तर यो रुई कार्यक्रमले महिला हिंसाको तालिम आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ आफ्नो नाम परिचय पनि सबै दिनलाई सक्नु भएको छ र कस्तो छ भने बाहिर पनि गएर सबै थोक बोल्न सक्नुहुन्छ लड्न सक्नुहुन्छ अब हामी चाहिँ महिलाहरू एकदम बेरोजगारी बसेको थियौँ पहिले चाहिँ तरकारीको बिउ दिनु भयो कुखुराको चल्ला दिनु भयो हैन हामी धान काट्न गहुँ काट्नलाई मेसिन दिनु भछ
बच्चाहरूको लागि पौष्टिक आहार सर्वोत्तम पिठो पनि हामीले पाएको थियौँ जुन कि बच्चाले खाएपछि बच्चामा धेरै विकास हुने कि अनि त्यो कार्यक्रम त 3 महिनाको लागि मात्र थियो तर त्यस्तै त्यही लेखे अनुसार हामीले घरमै बच्चाहरूलाई चामलहरू भुटेर अनि चनाहरू त्यस्तै मिलाएर खुवाउने गरेर चाहिँ धेरै राम्रो भएको छ
यो रुई कार्यक्रमले दिएको योजनामा चाहिँ हामीले काम गर्दाखेरिमा दिनको 388 ले हाजिरा पायौँ र अनि हामीले कुलोको सिँचाइ आएपछि तरकारी लगाउन पायौँ तरकारी अब तरकारीबाट सिँचाइबाट कुलोमा जहिले पनि पानी लगाउन पाइयो अनि यसै गरी अब तरकारी हामीले पहिला ल्याएर 1 किलो खान्थ्यौँ भनेदेखि कति मिठो हुन्थ्यो भनेदेखि अहिले हामीले 100 किलो उब्जाउन थाल्यौँ त्यही जग्गाबाट र हामीले त्यसै गरी बेच्न पनि सक्यौँ
हामीले जुन रुई कार्यक्रमको तालिम लिइकन चाहिँ हामीले आफूले सङ्कुष्ट गरेर यो महिला दिदीबहिनीहरूलाई यसरी लाउने यसरी गर्ने लेबर खर्च यसरी गर्ने भनेर चाहिँ हामीले बिल्डिङलाई चाहिँ अहिलेसम्मको चाहिँ हामीले तयारी बनाएका छौँ
जहाँसम्म महिलाको न्युट्रिसन र क्यापेसिटी वृद्धिको कुराहरू छ यो 3 जिल्लामा भएको पाइलट प्रोग्रामलाई चाहिँ हामी अनुसरण गरिकन अन्य क्षेत्रहरूमा रेप्लिकेट गर्न सक्छौँ
I'm sure you agree there's nothing more powerful than hearing from the beneficiaries themselves how their lives have changed from the project. But let's discuss some of the specific approaches and aspects of evaluating results of the program and the impact. There's going to be some time at the end for questions. I'm going to be a really strict timekeeper because we've got such a short time together today. So apologies in advance to any of the panelists if I politely cut you off at any time just to keep the discussion moving. So let me introduce quickly who is here with us. We've got Susan Carrier, who's the Senior Gender Officer in the Division of Social Policies and Rural Institutions at FAO. Then next to her is Ndaya Belchika, the Lead Technical Specialist of Gender and Social Inclusion at IFAD. And then at the far end is Per Mokstad, Senior Advisor from the Section for UN Policy from Norway's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Then if you look to the side here on the screen, we have Ibrahim Bangana, Technical Advisor from the Ministry of Agriculture in Niger. So thank you for joining us from Niger today. We're first going to start with Susan, who's going to talk about implementing an innovative tool for measuring women's empowerment in agricultural development projects in Ethiopia. So, Susan, can you briefly present, it's the Women's Empowerment for Agriculture Index. How does it work, and what have some of the key results been?
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. We are very pleased that we have such a good audience here today. So today I'm going to share some results from applying the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, which is an innovative tool to measure women's empowerment in the JPRWEE in Ethiopia. The program in Ethiopia is implemented in partnership with the government, just like the Kyrgyzstan one and other national stakeholders. It operates in 2 regions, in Oromia and in Afar, working with pastoralist women, and targets about 2,500 women. It offers the same idea, an integrated package of interventions, but a main one is increasing access to finance through the establishment of rural savings and credit cooperatives. But there's a lot of capacity development of the Ministry of Agriculture, but also of the women themselves in terms of entrepreneurship, financial literacy, food reserves, nutrition. There's our work around increasing access to improved technologies, seeds, beehives, milk processing equipment. We spend a lot of time. We have an activity around community conversations that help to address sociocultural norms, but also work at the policy level. Next. So what is the WEA? The Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index was developed by USAID and IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Index, and it was launched in 2012. USAID wanted to use it for the programs that they have, a big program they had called Feed the Future. And the idea was to make sure that they could measure women's inclusion in the agriculture sector. The tool looks at women's domain, women's empowerment domains in 5 areas. So it's around production, decisions on production, resources, income, leadership, and time allocation. But it also compares how the woman does relative to the male adult in the household. So that's a gender parity index. It's a survey-based index. And they've been various. It's now actually in about 39 countries. Go ahead. So this is how it looks like. As I said, it has 5 domains: production, resources, income, leadership, and time. And then for each of those, there are various indicators. What I would prefer to do is show you the variation that we're working with, which is called project level WEA. So please go to the next slide. And essentially what happened is when we started to talk about how we could make the WEA useful to our projects, there were various things that everybody thought was missing. There was dimensions such as access to information, access to and decisions on credit, whether a woman has a financial account or not. So we started to play around with the WEA. And the way this happened is that IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, has a new project. It's called the Gender, Agriculture and Assets Project Phase 2, popularly called GAP2. And the UN Joint Program in Ethiopia is part of 13 projects that are participating in GAP2 that are developing this project level WEA. And the idea is really to adapt the WEA to be able to measure women's empowerment in projects, but also including other more interesting things like individual empowerment, intra-household relations, but also nutrition and health. What I should say is that the pro-WEA was also very interesting because then there was a focus on having both a qualitative and a quantitative survey. So you link the two of them. One speaks to the other. One provides more in-depth information, explains the why, and the other one actually puts the numbers. So we implemented both of them. Next. So, and what I should say is that this, what I'm presenting was as a baseline. So the results are a baseline, and we will be going back at the end of this year and early next year to see what has changed. So what results do we have? Or what results did we find? So in terms of input into productive activities, very, very much things that we expect. You know, 45% of the women compared to men are engaged in non-farm self-employment, you know, the informal sector. That more women are employed as wage workers compared to women, so 6% versus 37%. But, you know, other things that the project needs to start to think about where women are getting disempowered. Important decisions such as input for agriculture production, when to plow, what to plant, were really made by men. And women were not contributing as much to that decision. And then women's autonomy was limited to things that were of lower monetary value. You know, women could make decisions around poultry, around eggs, maybe dairy products like milk. And another thing that we found that was really important was that women were disadvantaged in terms of access to information. And these results were actually quite significant. Next slide. In terms of control over income, we found that the degree of participation in the decision to use the income depended on whether you were involved in producing the activity or in the production of the activity. So if you were involved, then you had more control. The size of the income, as I've said, many times women were relegated to things of lower value. But culture also had an influence on which decisions women could make. And really, we found that women had autonomy over smaller amounts of income. This is a huge deal that needs to be discussed in the community dialogues, for example. In terms of access to credit, we were really pleased. 100% of the women reported that they are the ones that make decisions on use of credit. And actually, because the credit comes in their name, it gives them more bargaining power in the house. The final one, we also found that when we compared, that 55% of the women do not have bank accounts compared to 43% of men. Again, an issue that the program needs to work on. Next. Time use and mobility. This is a hugely important dimension within the WEA. In terms of time use, what became very clear is that women spend significantly more time in work activities than men. And 57% of the women work less than 10.5 hours compared to 73%. In the control communities, actually it was 83%, so even larger. We found one of the things that the WEA allows us to measure is how much time women take care of children and do something else, which is very common. So we found that women spent about 226 minutes taking care of children while they are digging, they are cooking, they are cleaning, carrying a baby on the back. And this is a huge important issue. And finally, the mobility. Mobility is one of the domains that we brought in the Pro-WEA. When we look at our quantitative results, they show not much significant difference. But when we had the qualitative discussion, it was hugely controversial. Women felt that mobility is very empowering, the ability to wake up and leave. But the men said, well, it depends. She might go out and find a partner. So it was discussed endlessly. But we also found out that the distance traveled is really important. Age. Younger women have less mobility than older women, but also wealth status made a huge difference whether you could wake up and go. Very clear that married women often have to seek permission of their husbands in order to travel far from their home. This is very short results of what we found, and I'll talk a little bit later about other interesting results. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm sure there'll be questions for you at the end, but let's move on to Ndaya. Gerald he has already spoken about the goals methodology that in terms of Kyrgyzstan. Maybe you can talk a little bit about why IFAD promotes this and why it's an effective way of promoting gender equality and doing development work.
Thank you, Joanne. How much time do I have?
If you can take like about 5 minutes with this, because I'd like to ask you about the results and the impact of this as well. So if you could give a brief introduction to what it is, and then we can talk a bit about the results.
Okay, thank you. So the Gender Action Learning System is a participatory approach that falls under the umbrella of the household methodology. And then the reason that it's a powerful approach is because it goes at the heart of looking at ways to actually change the gender roles, addressing some of the underlying reasons and causes that actually leads to inequalities between men and women. So it's a challenging approach, but now it has been demonstrated that if we want as a global community to achieve the 2030 agenda, then there are some transformative changes that have to take place beyond just looking at the statistics and deriving some comfort that we are reaching women because we reach 50% of the women. Now we are talking about the quality of that outreach. So through the GALS, the Gender Action Learning System, it's a tool that has been, or an approach that is being developed in partnership with other agencies, particularly some NGOs, and it's flexible to the extent that it can be applied in different contexts. It was piloted in Africa, now it's being implemented also in Kyrgyzstan, and now we are piloting that in Guatemala. So it's flexible. It's also adaptable to the extent that it can be applied in combination to a number of technical projects. So when the approach is provided or introduced into the household, it's not just to talk about what they do in general, but it's to talk about the gender roles within the context of one specific activity. So it's linked to some specific project as well. Then it's also inclusive because when that tool is introduced in the household, then everybody participates. It's the youth participate. In the case of Kyrgyzstan, mother-in-law participates, women from an older generation participate, which is quite important. And in some other contexts, of course, the men also participate in the debate. So it's an inclusive tool. And now, as we are talking about leaving no one behind, we also saw the possibility of including women taking care of disability member of the family, because it doesn't take a lot of time requirement, so everyone can participate, including those households that are led by female or the women's taking care of young children. So it's adaptable, it's flexible in terms of linking that to some specific thematics, and also it is inclusive and then can be applied in different contexts. Then, if I may, what is also very powerful is the fact that the tool itself builds on some specific principle that everyone, regardless to your level of development, economic development, have aspirations. Now the question is, what do you do with that and how do you tap into it? Through the GALs, it's really to use simple tools so that the family members can together, or even the member of a cooperative, articulate what is the vision that they see from themselves. And that's quite powerful because even the poorest household can actually articulate a vision that is achievable, and then themselves can decide how they're going to together achieve that vision. Because now they have an aspirational way of looking at the future, and now in contrast to that, they can look at where they are currently and then start mapping what will it take to actually move from where we are today to where we want to go. So there are some steps looking at the opportunities, which are typically offered by projects and partnerships such as the JPRWEE, FAO, WFP, and IFAD. And now there are also some of the challenges that are discussed openly within the household or within the community group or within the other farmer-based organization to actually identify how to address those issues. So that's one of the reasons IFAD believe it's a powerful tool, because when we look at specifically on how it works, we also saw that it addresses the 5 different domains that are currently measured by the WEEA itself and the RWEE.
Thank you. So how do you measure the outcomes of, how do you really measure the outcomes of this, and connected to that, what are some of the key results that you've seen?
So measuring the outcome has been, to be frankly, frank and honest, has been difficult. It's always a challenge to do that for a number of reasons. One is that looking at some of those information at the household level, it has to be standardized. So it's always a challenge when we apply a methodology in different contexts across different projects to agree on how to do a measurement. However, there is a growing body of evidence, one of which is a statistical article published by Kathy Farnworth, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, where she's showing without any doubt now that the GALS approach has the potential to deepen the result, the sustainability of the result, and as well as strengthen economic empowerment, allocation of resources, and then workload. So there is some growing evidence showing that that it works. Now, in the context of the project itself, so now there was the evaluation conducted in Kyrgyzstan, and that was powerful because the project itself targeted a number of villages in 2 cohorts. So we had 45 villages in the first cohort and then 28 in the second one. But the GALS approach was only applied in the first cohort. So the evaluation report measured some very strong differentiated results between the first cohort and the second cohort. And they were able actually to attribute some of the difference in result to the GALS approach, to the extent that the GALS was one of the significant differences between the 2 cohorts. And what was measured is the following. One was that the sustainability of the result is much greater when the GALS methodology was applied, because it's also looked at the planning process, the agency, and how to lobby outside of the household. The improving the well-being and the livelihood was also significant because, as was mentioned by Gerard, the discussion of freeing some time to actually either do more of the productive activity or just enjoying life differently was also very significant in the cohort that received the girls approach. And then the other element that was also significant is the distribution of assets as well as joint financial planning, whereby now all of the discussion was done together with an agreement on how the resources will be dispersed and how to do planning before and after and how to engage in economic activities. So there, the strong results were measured. More efforts need to take place, of course, but at least in terms of the sustainability of results, in terms of increased income and increased well-being, it is being shown to actually make some big difference.
Great, thank you so much. Let's turn our attention this way to Niger now. Ibrahim Bangana from the Ministry of Agriculture, and thank you also to his interpreter who will be who will be interpreting into English afterwards. So in Niger, you've done some nutrition studies that have shown that holistic multisectoral approaches of the JPRWEE program have been more impactful than other interventions. So how did you measure this, and what are some of the key findings, or the key results of your findings there?
Voilà, donc au Niger, nous avons eu des études exactement qui ont été faites. Les résultats des études de nutrition menées au Niger montrant que l'approche globale et multisectorielle de l'intervention du programme conjoint a beaucoup plus d'impact sur d'autres interventions. Comment avez-vous mesuré cela et quels ont été certains des résultats clés de vos conclusions?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much
de nous avoir donné cette occasion.
To give us this occasion.
Au nom du ministre d'État, en tout cas, nous remercions.
On behalf of the Minister of State, we thank the partners
dans le cadre
that intervene in the field of the program.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt you. It's a bit hard to hear you both. So maybe Ibrahim, if you could give your answer, and then we could have the English summary at the end of it, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
OK. Donc du coup, on va essayer de vous laisser finir, comme ça je vous donne exactement le commentaire en anglais, juste après vous.
Ok, d'accord. Donc je vous remercie beaucoup de l'occasion que vous nous donnez en vue de parler de l'intervention de ce programme conjoint au Niger. Donc, au nom du ministre d'État, je remercie les partenaires de ce programme conjoint, notamment la FAO, le FIDA, l'ONU Femmes et le PAM. Donc, les résultats que ce programme a eus sur le terrain, particulièrement au niveau de la sécurité alimentaire et de la nutrition, sont extrêmement positifs. Parce que dans les analyses, dans les enquêtes qui ont été faites à la base, avant le début du projet et à la fin, on montrait une nette progression au sein des populations rurales. Je prends le cas de quelques indicateurs. Pour l'allaitement maternel, la connaissance que les femmes ont sur cette question, au début du projet, on était à 60% des femmes et à la fin du projet, on est à 100% des femmes qui connaissent l'importance de cet allaitement maternel. Pour les connaissances qu'ont les hommes sur la mise au sein immédiate, bon, les hommes, parce que dans les différentes structures que le programme conjoint a eu à installer au niveau des communautés de base, il y a des discussions au niveau des clubs d'Imitra entre les hommes et les femmes, ainsi que les jeunes. Donc c'est vraiment un brassage et c'est des connaissances qui sont en tout cas transmises. Donc les hommes, avant, il y avait 44% des hommes qui ont cette connaissance. Alors, de l'étude de CAP, connaissance, attitude et pratique, le nombre est parti à 53. Pour la connaissance par les jeunes filles sur la mise au sein immédiatement après la naissance, il y avait 47%. Et à la fin du projet, à la fin de l'enquête, on avait 66%. On avait 66%. Pour la connaissance des femmes sur la durée de l'allaitement exclusive, c'était le tiers des femmes qui connaissaient ça. Et à la fin du projet, à la fin de l'enquête, on avait 51%. Donc, c'est extrêmement important. Et nous avons des données comparatives par rapport à ce qu'ont fait les autres intervenants dans le même cadre. Si je prends le cas de l'alimentation infantile pour l'allaitement maternel, donc comme je le disais, c'est 60% des femmes connaissent cette importance à la base de l'enquête, et vers la fin c'est 100%. Pour les autres projets, nous avons, c'était de 91,89 à 83% à la fin de leur enquête.
Sorry, if I might just interrupt you there, sorry to interrupt you, but maybe we can just have an English translation of what you've said so far for the people in the audience who didn't follow. Thanks.
Ok, donc du coup, on ne veut pas vous interrompre, mais quand même, si on peut trouver exactement une traduction anglaise pour que l'audience qui est là peut plus, en fait, comprendre un peu de quoi nous sommes en train de parler. Voilà. So, thank you very much for this occasion you gave us and the opportunity. On behalf of the government of Niger, we thank you for this opportunity. To ensure you, we have gotten about like positive results of this about this project. So, for example, when we talk about maternal nursing, we have, in terms of, in our scheme here, in terms of the maternal nursing, we from the beginning we have like 60%. Then at the end we got 100%. And about the main knowledge, first of all, we get from the start we got like 44%, and at the end we received 53. About girls' knowledge, from the beginning we got 47%, and at the end 66. For women knowledge on the duration of the nursing, for the beginning we have 35.5%, at the end we got 51%. For the complete feeding, we received by the beginning 48%, and at the end 65%. And the inclusive hygiene assessment, the techniques of purification and of water. So by the beginning we have 60%, and at the end 63%.
Ok. Donc concernant les autres intervenants, c'est pour vous montrer que le programme conjoint a été plus positif sur le terrain que les autres intervenants. Par rapport à ces indicateurs, pour les autres intervenants, pour l'alimentation maternelle, les autres intervenants, ils avaient en début d'enquête autour de 91% et à la fin 83% environ. Pour l'alimentation complémentaire, nous avons 83%. Pour les autres, je dis les autres projets intervenant dans la nutrition, 83%. Et à la fin, lors de l'évaluation de l'étude CAP, ils ont à peu près 90%. Donc nous voyons qu'il y a vraiment une très grande différence. Il y a même une chute par rapport à la connaissance de l'allaitement maternel que nous avons constaté sur le terrain.
So regarding the other intervention, by the beginning we have the women nursing, we got a 91.89%, and at the end we found 83.33%. That was a fall. And with the other intervention also, we receive for the complete, nursing feeding, by the beginning, we had 83.78%, and at the end, we have 80.91. So there is total difference between our intervention and theirs too.
So let me just ask you, your results show you that this holistic approach worked much better than other interventions, but what needs to be in place for a holistic approach or multi-sectoral approach like this to work? What needs to happen in country for that to be successful?
Donc voilà, comme vous venez de le dire, en fait, vous avez dit que exactement votre intervention, et il y a une grande différence entre les deux interventions. Maintenant, selon vous, qu'est-ce que vous pensez exactement, quels seront les besoins exactement mis en place pour une approche globale comme celle-ci qui sort? Voilà.
Ok, merci. Et donc, ce qui a amené, en tout cas, à ce résultat très palpable sur le terrain, c'est que le programme conjoint, en collaboration avec tous les intervenants, a mis un dispositif composé de plusieurs phases. La première des choses, c'est d'abord une approche holistique, une approche globale et de synergie au niveau de tous les acteurs. Et chacune des parties prenantes, notamment les agences des Nations Unies, apporte son avantage comparatif. Les interventions se font dans les villages, ce n'est pas dispersé, toutes les interventions se font dans un seul village et les interventions sont multisectorielles. Maintenant, au niveau des synergies et de la coordination, il y a des dispositifs qui ont été mis en place. Un des premiers, c'est une coordination technique qui regroupe les différents organes et les organes étatiques pour la planification. Ce comité technique-là, il se réunit mensuellement. Une deuxième chose importante, c'est l'action sur le terrain, l'action opérationnelle qui est mise en œuvre par les ONG. Et ces ONG ont créé une plateforme de discussion interactive avec les populations, avec les différents acteurs. La troisième chose, et non des moindres, extrêmement important, c'est la porte d'entrée au niveau du village. Ce que nous appelons ici les clubs d'Imitra. Ces clubs d'Imitra, c'est des clubs de mobilisation, c'est des clubs d'action, et c'est des clubs à la longue qui entraînent un changement de comportement dans le cadre de cette question de sécurité alimentaire et de nutrition au niveau des populations. Et c'est ces clubs d'Imitra qui interagissent avec le comité technique, avec les différentes ONG à travers leur plateforme. Et c'est ça qui a amené une avancée significative des différents indicateurs.
Okay, well, here is basically what make us those improvement in our work is the synergy of those intervention people. So first of all, I'm going to go to explain you three phases that make a positive, positive result of these interventions. The first phase is the technical coordination. So we have set a kind of coordination of people who gather once in a month. And the second one is the technical action. We have a kind of a platform of discussion with population, and that's also help us to make a positive to have a positive result. And the last one, that we call it, you know, like entrance portal. I mean, entrance gate. Please. Yeah, the entry print. I mean, that help us to have a kind of synergy with the population and the NGOs that are implemented for those tasks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's move on to Per Mokstad from Norway's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As one of the key donors of this program, how important is it for you to have a systematic evaluation and to see these kinds of results?
Thank you, but let me first thank for the presentations. They were very interesting. And it clearly shows that it's necessary with a holistic and integrated approach to the empowerment. The SDG, again, in itself, it's an integrated agenda. And the Sustainable Development Goals, there are synergies between them. And we're also hoping for synergies between different UN organizations. That's why we're very eager on the reform side. Why we need to know the impact of what we do is, of course, because we want to have a more just world, and we want to have less poor people in the world. And from a small country, it's also an idea of that world where it's ruled by law. It's also a more secure world for a small country. It's because when you ask the population in Norway if they want us to give aid, the surveys show that the majority is very positive. If you ask them and a survey on the impact of aid, then there's very few that believe it really have a lot of impact. And that's a bit interesting that you have a population that wants to continue with aid but don't really believe it has a lot of impact. There was a survey on what people thought the development had been the last 20, 30 years. Most people thought that there has been there was no progress on girls' education, no progress in health. So it's really there's a lack of knowledge of all the progress that it's really have been. Of course, under this CFS, we've learned that there's been negative when it comes to hunger and nutrition over the last 3 years. But anyway, there has been a lot of progress in these last decades. A reason also is for special programs like this, Norway gives 1% of BNP every year for aid. This last year, it shows that 54 or 55% was through the UN system. That means we have to try to explain to the people that the money we use, which is over half the budget through the UN, that it gives something, that there is an impact. But of course, we're not only interested in the impact when it comes to on more production and agriculture increase. It's also the impact, of course, on the empowerment of women, and because we have a human rights approach to all we're doing, and the women's empowerment is a very, very big deal of that. And we also know that the women are the main producers. So of course there is that is an impact that is also very interesting to get information about. The third impact we're after is really on the system itself, that the UN organizations cooperate better, that we go towards a kind of vision of one UN at country level. So that is also part of what the results we want to see through this. If it is like that, when you cooperate, the UN organizations get better results. That is an interesting result for us. And also with defending, we're interested in multilateralism as such. There is a lot of pushbacks now on a multilateral world order. And we all the time have an underlying wish for strengthening the UN as such. I'll just end by saying something about what we do on results and result frameworks and evaluations. We work very hard in most of the organizations that we support. We work very hard on, for example, we ask the funds and programs to have one budget line for evaluation so we can monitor the evaluation, how much resources are used on that. And we are also had, from years ago, we had a lot of work together with the UN, many UN organizations on result frameworks. So this is a kind of ongoing work. Thank you.
Just very quickly before we go to questions, I mean, you mentioned that it's, you know, you're interested to see the results of the joint program and the results of working together. But as a donor, is it more attractive to you to be putting money towards a joint program as opposed to individual programs?
Yes.
That was a quick answer. Good.
And also together with other donors.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. Gerald, maybe you can come and take a seat up at the end here in case there are any questions for you. We'll try to get in as many questions as possible, so if you could keep your questions brief. The messengers have microphones, I think. So, questions for anybody? From anybody, for anybody? Yes, we have one over here. Thank you.
Hi, actually, a question for you. Maybe you could just... Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting. I read quite a lot about this unfortunate practice of bride kidnapping and the cross-country issue of it as well, preventing women from going to, girls from going to school or walking on their own at all. What is the legal framework and how can we influence that to really work hard on preventing that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The issue is that the laws in Kyrgyzstan are very good. The international community focuses on making them even better, but what the focus should really be on is to implement them. People in the state are not really held accountable for not doing their job. Let me just bring one case to your attention. Just about a month ago, there was an unfortunate case of a girl being actually killed at a police station who had been abducted, and both the abductor and the girl were taken to the police station, which is something that happens very rarely because usually the police simply look away. And there she was murdered by this person being left alone, the two of them in one room. That led the president of the country, the prime minister and the United Nations country team all say, of course, in public that this is unacceptable. The problem then is that, you know, the president, who has no real authority over this, and made the, all the staff of this police station fired without an investigation, which isn't really the rule of law. And the NGOs said that within 1 month the court case must be closed against the person who killed that girl, which is also not really in line with the rule of law. So the problem is, if we really want to address the issue, we need to go through the rule of law, and we need to hold those police and other state officials accountable who are looking away when in fact that case happens in their village, that are told about it, they don't act. The additional problem is that the culture of the country in certain communities at least is that the girl, if she were to actually get away from the abductor, would not be taken back by her family. So she hasn't really got anyone to go to, not the family often, not the law, not anyone else. So we really need to have a change in attitude and behavior and practices, and that's what we're advocating. And rather than training the police, as many of us in the international development community are doing, or the NGOs suggest, telling the policeman that it's illegal to abduct the girl, which the policeman obviously knows, we need to really work through the state to hold people accountable to fulfill their functions, and to have the communities not attend the weddings of underage girls, or attend the weddings of bride kidnapped girls, because that is really the dimension between shame and honor corner where you can really influence things. A majority of people in the country are against bride kidnapping, and that's in fact why the law only a few years ago was strengthened. Before, the penalty was equal or less to someone stealing sheep. It is now more, but even in those days it was a prison term, and the prison sentence is hardly ever administered. So we really need to change the thing. And maybe one more minute, sorry, I know we're taking up time. A few years ago there was a case of one girl being abducted against the wish, of course, of her parents, who went to the media. They didn't know where this girl had been taken, and they published her photo and said, you know, we don't accept it, we will not rest until we have our daughter back. And then the supposed mother-in-law who had put up her son to actually kidnap that girl let that girl go, and then she wanted to launch a court case against the abductor. And then the mother who had asked her son to abduct this girl was interviewed, and she said, oh my goodness, now the future of my son will be in jeopardy because the law is after him.
A lot of work for UN Women over there. Some more questions. There's one. Okay, we've got quite a few now, so let's take a few together. I see one man at the back there. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you very much to the sponsors and the presenters for a very informative and quite concise presentation. We've heard of several tools that can be used in the context of the rural sector or agriculture to support gender empowerment. Are these tools consolidated or pulled together in any one site or any source where we could access them and use them across our own with our colleagues?
Great, thank you. There's one on the side over here. Thanks.
Hello, Christiane, monsieur. I would like to ask a question to the Niger people over there, and also maybe clarify a few points that were mentioned very briefly. I think the representative of the Ministry of Agriculture was willing in the first question to talk about the importance of these surveys called CAP surveys, knowledge, attitudes and practices, which are very fundamental if you want to measure, if anyone wants to measure any nutritional action in the field. So it was very important to have these very details, but at the same time the importance of these studies. At the same time, he was also willing to mention that if we want holistic approaches to work, such as the one used in the RWEE in, I think, all the countries, it's important to have specific mechanism to make it work. And he was mentioning the 3 mechanisms used in this project in Niger, which was the one related to the United Nations agencies, plus the government. And then there was the mechanism of the NGO implementation agencies with a platform. And then the third element is the Dimitra Club's entry point, which is an approach which is similar and different from the GALS, because it's a community approach more than a household approach. Now I'll go back to the question. I would like to ask the representative of the ministry about the relationship in the technical committee level between the different ministries involved in the program and the UN agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for adding in some of those details for us. There was a question at the... So we'll answer the question. We'll go back and answer questions all together. Let's just take a couple of questions from the floor, and then we'll do a round of answering. Thanks. There's one in the front.
Thank you very much. I'm Minouyen, and I'm with the Permanent Mission of Canada here, as well as the FAO, the focal point for FAO for the Gender Network in Rome. And I'm also pleased to attend here on behalf of the co-chairs of the Gender Network in Rome, Ambassador Lineo Molise from Lesotho and Ambassador Greg French from Germany. And I think that we're very happy to see this year again, this event at the CFS, showing the second phase of this project, where you started measuring qualitatively and quantitatively the impact, and as well displaying, the different tools, leveraging the strength of the different agencies. I guess for my part, I'd like to know, given that the learning component was also important in this project, how each of the UN agencies, if you had something that you would say that coming out of it, you're doing differently now that you were not doing, what would it be?
Thank you. If we got one more question, it's over here, please.
Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing this evaluation. I find it quite impressive, so congratulations to all the agencies involved. Apparently the results have been very strong, positive, at the local level and at the individual level. My question has to do with impact on the policy environment at a more macro level, going beyond the individual and the local, which also pertains to the sustainability aspect. And also the mainstreaming of the experiences from this pilot program, not only into national policy, but into the policies or the overall program design within the UN agencies. So I see the mainstreaming at two levels, at the national level in these countries, and also in the context of the UN agencies. So could you please, and this is for everyone, all the speakers, can you please comment on this?
Okay, maybe Susan, you want to talk very briefly about the consolidated, where one could find all these tools so that others can use them as well.
Thank you very much for your questions. The information around the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index actually has a very specific website. It's called the WEEA, because it's pronounced WEEA despite the fact that it's WEAI, the WEEA Resource Center. And this information, if you go in there, they have up to questionnaires, they have guidelines, so there's plenty of that information available. So you can access it there.
So the WEEA is on one website and the GALS is on another website?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And the reason, what I should say is what I shared with you about the WEEA is work that we as a joint program is doing in collaboration with the International Food Policy Research Institute. And we are contributing, we're one of the projects there. Of course, the lessons that are coming from there are being felt and are being used in the other countries of the JPRWEE. But this is a very specific research project. So this is where you would find that. I think the work on the girls, she will mention where it is. But of course, the results of our work as a JPRWEE do sit somewhere that you can find, the lessons, the good stories, and I'm sure Azura will tell us where those are as well. I wanted to answer something.
Yeah, if I could just say, maybe that's also a good message, that these kinds of tools and the lessons you're learning about the impact and evaluation are useful to be sharing further. So that's very good feedback to get from here. Do you want to quickly respond to some of the other questions, and then we'll...
How is what we are doing with the RWEE influencing what we are doing as FAO? And in this case, I'll talk about FAO. I think it's very clear that this whole idea of an integrated approach for the empowerment of rural women is becoming much more useful and really much more stronger within FAO. We now have, within one of the strategic programs, for example, we have a dedicated output on accelerating gender equality and rural women's economic empowerment, and most of the activities there are related to pushing through an integrated approach for working with rural women. So this is very clear that this is becoming an important area of work for FAO and really influencing the work that we are doing.
Thank you. As everyone I'm sure is noticing, we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to ask you everyone to be really brief with their responses. Ndaya, maybe you can respond briefly to the question from Canada about what we're doing differently now with the knowledge of these results, and also how the work is being more mainstreamed and sustainable both in national policy and in the work of the agencies.
Thank you. So one of the lessons that we've learned, particularly coming after the fact that many of the evidence has been anecdotal, it's actually strengthening the argument that the gender action learning system is an approach that it actually works, and therefore it requires a systematic approach. And then that's what we are working currently even within IFAD and across agencies. Actually, we are finalizing a grant that would be financed by the EU, a 5-year grant, where we're actually going to be focusing on transformative approaches, and then to make sure that we communicate, build on the synergy to make sure that we learn from the lessons. So one approach is that. So we are learning that it's working. We want to strengthen that into better documentation, discussing the theory of change, and strengthening the tools on how to go implementing the different approaches. In terms of how to mainstream, so the question was whether the tools are, or where to find them. So the gender action learning system is not a proprietary approach. It's open source, so anybody can go and Google and then find the information. What is key, though, it's how to go implementing that in the different contexts, with whom to do that, and that, whether it's at the design stage, implementation, and how to do the ongoing. And so that's where IFAD has also spent some time developing the how to do notes, some very detailed guidelines that we are in the process of finalizing, but it is also available where anybody can access and use them. Mainstreaming, so we are in the process of also mainstreaming the gender approach within IFAD as an institution, in terms of institution itself and across the program. Because, as it was mentioned by Pierre, we talk about an integrated 2030 agenda, which means that throughout all of the interventions, gender has to be mainstreamed, and beyond being mainstreamed, the approach has to be transformative. And so that's one of the challenges that all agencies are facing, is how to make sure that the interventions, whether individually or collaboratively, are actually gender transformative. And the commitment is made to do that. Specifically for IFAD, it means a commitment that for the next 3 years, it would be 25% of its intervention that would be gender transformative, that is addressing the root cause of gender inequality. And then across agencies, and of course, I'm sure you are familiar with the UN SWAP, then also there is the effort to mainstream gender beyond just the mainstreaming, but really focusing on transformative approach.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, let me very, very quickly go, because we are going to need to close soon. So let's quickly go to Niger. If you can keep your answer very brief. The question to you was about the relationship between the different ministries and how that's played a role in the success of this work.
Positif.
Okay. Merci.
Thank you.
Donc, au niveau de la mise en œuvre de ce programme conjoint, nous avons parlé du comité technique. Donc, ce comité technique-là, il regroupe les 4 agences, c'est-à-dire la FAO, le PAM, le FIDA et l'ONU Femmes, plus les ministères, le ministère de l'Agriculture et de l'Élevage, le ministère en charge de la promotion de la femme et le Haut Commissariat à l'initiative 3N. Donc, comme je l'ai dit...
Oui. So, to respond to the question, we have many ministries that collaborate, and like hand in hand to come to a good success of this project. So among those, institutions, we have the committee, the technical group work, and 3N initiative, and the Ministry of Agriculture.
Donc ce comité, il se réunit mensuellement au niveau, soit dans les salles de réunion du ministère, ou au niveau des salles de réunion des différentes agences.
So with the technical group work, it's a kind of roasting meeting that we do, whether it's in the whole of the ministry and to the other institution too.
Thank you. So, that's a very good message that, it's one thing for the UN agencies to be working together, but you really need a holistic approach on the ground with the governments, different ministries working together, and the NGOs and the community all working together to make it a success as well. I'm sorry that we're going to have to draw all that to a close, and I'm sure our panelists will be around afterwards if you have specific questions for them. But just to close this session, we're very happy to have Amir Abdullah, Deputy Executive Director of WFP, with us. He's been a real champion of the whole program, so thank you so much for being here to close the session. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you, and really, as many of the panelists said, it's great to see so many of you here and following this. I think it really is a great session, I think. It's been very useful, and I think everyone, I hope, has enjoyed it. I think that I would perhaps like to just pick up on a few words of thanks, because I think I'd just like to thank the panelists. I think it was a great session, and merci beaucoup pour le ministère au Niger. I think it was really very, very useful that, and joining us by video. Obviously, thanks to our colleagues from IFAD and FAO. I was all the way through that wondering what GALS meant, so I was really glad when you actually told us it was, the Gender Action Learning System. It did occur to me that we probably need something like a gender uplifted livelihood system, so we could have guys and gals, but just to keep it gender balanced. No, it was great. But and thanks very much to Gunther for coming from Kyrgyzstan and Per from Norway. Really, just to come to attend that event really does show a huge amount of I think, interest, which we're delighted in. And I think that it would be perhaps just a thought in closing. I used some words the other day based on the fact that one of the big themes around the CFS week has been about action. And I was looking at, interesting things that people have said about action. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln with his action, words, actions are louder than words is the maxim, and telling us that we need actions. But I was really drawn by the words that were attributed to Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny." Now, I think you've clearly heard that we, the four agencies who are working on this RWEE, is that how are we? We, RWEE. I learned the new name too, are we? Are we going to support it? And I think, we, the four agencies, clearly believe in the RWEE. The women that we serve with this project, you've heard from them in Nepal, they clearly believe in it. The donors who have supported us to date clearly believe in it. but we need more of you to believe in it. We need more support. I mean, you know, we hear all the time about UN reform, working together, RBA collaboration. Here you've got RBA +1, and a great +1, by the way. So we hear so much about it. Here we've seen it in action. Here we've seen it succeeding. So I would just ask you to also believe in this project. And through that belief, let's help more women reach their destiny. Thank you.
It almost feels like a shame to say anything because anything I say is going to fall flat after that dramatic ending. But thank you so much. And thank you all for being here with us today. It's been great to have you all share in all these results. And panelists, I'm sure you're available for a little bit should anyone have individual questions for you. We can hang around or outside the room for a little bit should you have any questions for them. Thank you very much. Bye.